events depict the life of Deborah Michaels, who is my grandmother and the person I chose to interview. She lived through the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. This film will give you her point of view through it all.
And they had nuclear weapons and they were threatening. There was a guy in charge called Nikita Khrushchev, and he was pretty threatening, and he basically said that he could annihilate the United States and just, with a missile attack with nuclear weapons and things like that. So it was really scared people. So the communism was really bad. The Russians actually put up the unmanned spacecraft called Sputnik, and it was the first, I think it was unmanned. I think maybe they sent a monkey in it, I can't remember, but it was unmanned, and that was sort of kicked off the space race with them during the late 60s.
The space race began in the 20th century, 1955 to be exact. The race was between the United States and the Soviet Union, or the USSR. The reasoning for the race was to protect the country's national security, to show supremacy throughout the world. The race began when the USSR responded to a United States announcement on their intent to launch a satellite. The Soviets' response was to announce that they too would launch a satellite. The Soviets were the first ones to launch by launching the Sputnik 1 in 1957.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket. Here, an artist's conception of how the feat was accomplished. A three-stage rocket. Number one, the booster in the class of an intercontinental missile. Its weight estimated at 50 tons. The smaller second stage took over at 5,000 miles an hour and carried on to the highest point reached. 500 miles up, the artificial moon is boosted to a speed counterbalancing the pull of gravity and released. You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite, one of the great scientific feats of the age.
The race would reach its peak on July 20th, 1969. The U.S. landed the first humans on the moon with Apollo 11. After the Apollo 11 landing, the two countries came to an agreement in April of 1972. The agreement was on a cooperative satellite, which officially ended the space race.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. 7, 6, commencing countdown, engines on. 3.
President Kennedy got killed, and I remember that so vividly when he got killed, because I was 13, I believe, and they kind of thought that the man who killed him was linked with communists or had Russian ties to Cuba. And so that was kind of unsettling, to think that those people could come over and kill, to kill our president.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy shocked millions around the world, and is now one of the most memorable moments in the United States history. The clip that is about to be shown shows the reactions of U.S. citizens to the assassination.
This is Edwin Newman in the NBC newsroom in New York. This information from Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds. This is the latest information we have from Dallas.
What's your feeling right now?
I really couldn't say. Really, right now I just don't know what to do.
Was there much emotion among the congregation?
There was, really. It was amazing to see the number of men who came into the cathedral sobbing, almost convulsed with sorrow, anguish.
But all we can do now is pray for him, and it's about all we can do. An entire loss to the world. It's hardly believable.
and Russia was then invading Afghanistan, and I remember that because they did that, we didn't go to the Olympics. I can't remember where it was being held, but we didn't go. We boycotted the Olympics. I think that was during President Carter made that decision not to go into to join in the Olympics, which I think was the right thing to do.
In 1979, President Jimmy Carter decided to boycott the 1980 Summer Olympics, which were held in Sochi, Russia. This decision was made after the Soviet Russia invaded Afghanistan. Like my grandma, many Americans agreed with the decision, but the Olympic athletes did not. The athletes believed that this would not change the minds of the Soviets, and they believed that the best thing to do was to send them over, so they could show who the dominant nation was.
President Carter won a major victory today in his bid to boycott the Moscow Olympic Games because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In Colorado Springs, ABC's Tom Shell was on hand for the announcement of a decision on sending a U.S. team to Moscow.
The United States Olympic Committee has decided not to send a team to the 1980 Summer Games in Moscow.
It's just that they weren't there, so I led a very segregated childhood, really. But then I do think that as a kid there was a notion in our heads that they were different than we were. Mm-hmm. My parents certainly never said anything overtly, but you just did sense that they were different.
My grandma grew up in Portland, Oregon, and even there were signs of segregation. She said that her school is dominantly white and that the communities rarely intermixed. As a kid, my grandma was never told the true meaning of segregation, but always followed the ways of the culture. This video took you through the life of Deborah Michaels, who witnessed and went through the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. This video goes to show how hard it was to live in this time period and how segregated the world really was.